They walked side by side into the hotel. Porky ain't gonna give us no credit unless you give him some sex, Terry, so asking him for credit is one wasted effort. The enormity of her problem began to penetrate her consciousness. Ain't no sense thinking about asking Teddy to give us some credit, Terry said, 'cause since he copped that white girl, he don't even want to talk to me. The mere thought of Teddy aroused her anger. Anyway, I wouldn't ask that little son of a bitch for nothing if I was dying. Well, then what we gonna do? Minnie asked, repeating her question. Minnie led the way into her room, and they sat on the bed. Terry, I know how much you dislike the idea, but ain't but two things we can do. She waited for a minute to make sure she had Terry's attention. We can both try and get committed in a hospital, and that ain't too likely. Or we can go up on the street and try and stop a trick. At the mention of selling her body, Terry's face twisted into a frown. Before she could comment, Minnie rushed on. We ain't got no other choice, Terry. Either you can wait until you're real sick, girl, and by then it ain't gonna make you no difference about turning no tricks, or go and do it now. Terry's conscience set up a small warning. She could see herself slowly retrogressing. Each week, it seemed as though she would end up breaking another principle. Soon all of her little morals would be gone, and then she wondered what would she be. Nothing. The thought of trying to kick entered her mind, but just as quickly, she rejected it on the grounds that she was too sick today. Maybe tomorrow she'd get up early and try to find a hospital, but today, she would have to have one more due. Minnie began to sense her surrender and pushed her point home. It ain't as bad as some people think, Terry. I'll show you how to hold your legs so you won't get female trouble. Minnie waited eagerly for Terry's reply. Everything depended on Terry. Minnie knew she had become too large to make money herself. There was a hardness in Terry's voice as she answered. I guess one or two won't kill me. She didn't bother to explain to Minnie that the only man she'd had relations with was Teddy, and that had only been on 3 different occasions. She knew that her reluctance in sex was not because of her being frigid or anything like that, but simply that she had never wanted to have children out of wedlock. Maybe I've always been too old-fashioned, she reasoned with herself as she got up and started towards the door. I'm going to get dressed, Minnie. I won't be but a few minutes. Minnie tried to hide the pleasure she felt. Now everything would be all right, she reasoned. Once Terry, with her looks, learned how to turn tricks, it wouldn't be hard for her to support both their habits. With slow deliberation, Terry put on her clothes. She took her time and made up her face so that she looked her best. Next, she slipped on a pair of high black boots that matched the black miniskirt she wore under her tan minicoat. Her beautiful legs were displayed to perfection. When she stepped out of the room, she looked like anything but a dope fiend. After Minnie showed her how to hold her legs, they started out the door. If you should get a trick that wants some head, Terry, it's easier than having him jump up and down in your stomach. Terry stopped in the hallway and put her hands on her hips. If you're talking about me putting my mouth down there on some man, you've got another think coming. Dumbfounded, Minnie stared at her. Well, I was just mentioning it to you. Some of them want you to go that way. Terry's nature was becoming harder every day. Her voice was harsh and cold as she stared straight at Minnie. I hope you don't think you're going to be out there just supervising, 'cause that's the last thing I need. I don't see nothing wrong with your head. It's only your belly that's swollen up big as a house. With a lightheartedness that she didn't feel, Minnie tried to laugh. Oh, girl, I'm planning to take care of whatever business you can't handle. It was early in the day when they reached the corner. Terry found out it was harder than she thought to sell one's body. They had been out on the corner for over an hour, but still neither one of them had broke luck. At first, Terry had been ashamed to yell at the passing cars with white men in them, but as the morning wore on and her monkey began to act up, she found herself whistling and yelling with more vigor each time. Finally, a car slowed down and turned the corner. Terry ran down the street after it, as though she had been doing this all her life. The man behind the steering wheel was white and heavy-set, with a large gut. After they talked for a few minutes, he agreed to spend $20 with her. She was the most attractive whore he had ever seen on this street. She climbed in the car and directed him back to her hotel. When they entered, the old woman in the caretaker's apartment smiled her toothless smile at her as they went up the stairs. When they entered her room, Terry stood nervously against the door. She could feel the butterflies acting up in her stomach. She gritted her teeth. "Well, I've come this far," she told herself. "So there's no turning back now." The John removed $20 from his wallet and held it out to her. "Here you go, girlie," he said in a nasal-sounding voice. She accepted the money from his outstretched hand and put it in her bra. "Do you want me to take off everything?" she asked in a frightened voice. The trick seemed surprised. Yes." "Do what you want to do," he replied, sitting on the end of the bed and watching her closely as she began to undress. He caught his breath as she came out of her dress. Those golden brown thighs were the loveliest he had ever had the delightful opportunity of laying his eyes on. He stared in fascination. "My God," he uttered hoarsely. Terry stood before him in only her bra and panties. He quickly began to shed his clothing. She stretched out on the bed, waiting, trepidation in her heart. The only thing that stopped her from running out of the room was her terror of the horror of drug sickness. The John climbed on the bed beside her. She closed her eyes as she felt his hands fumbling with her panties. As though in a dream, she could feel him tugging them down over her hips, then around her legs, and finally down to her ankles. She opened her legs slightly as she felt him climbing between them. Suddenly she felt something wet on her stomach. Next, it moved down to her thighs. Then she felt his hands parting her legs. As she opened them, she could feel his lips moving coarsely towards her vagina. Almost immediately, she felt his warm, hot tongue invade her vulva. Her whole body turned a dark red as she blushed, embarrassed by her first experience of oral sex. His darting tongue started a tingling sensation inside her womb as it leaped from one tender spot to another. Against her will, she could feel her legs opening wider. Her hips began to move in jerks. Suddenly, without warning, an orgasm shook her whole body. She jerked and twisted from side to side as her sexual excitement reached a climax. The John raised himself up quickly and inserted his organ in her. Just as soon as he entered her, she could feel him discharging within her body. After she had washed up, the trick asked about going again. For a moment, Terry debated with herself about putting him out, but the thought of more money won out. After going through the same routine again, the John got up and dressed, $35 poorer. Terry waited until he had left the building, with a promise to see her the following week before she went down to Minnie's room. Minnie was standing in the hall waiting. "Damn, Terry. I thought he was going to stay up there with you forever, honey." Terry flashed the $20 bill, already planning on using most of the money for her own habit. "He didn't stay up there that long, did he?" With a pleased smile, Minnie answered, "Not if he was spending that much money. It wasn't as bad as you thought it was it?" "Not really," Terry answered quickly. "Minnie, would you run up to the store and get me some cigarettes and matches? I'll go over to Porky's and cop for us." Slowly, the smile left Minnie's face. "You gonna give me a blow, ain't you, Terry?" she asked in a pleading voice. "Of course I'm gonna give you a two, honey. I just want you to run to the store for me, and when you get back, I'll have you a $10 pack waiting." They went out the door together. Terry held a dollar bill toward Minnie. "Get some pop, too," she said. Terry watched Minnie waddle up the street. She thought coldly, "Minnie better get her mind together, 'cause I sure ain't about to try to keep up no two habits." Porky opened the door and let her in. He smiled. "I seen you done went into business for yourself, Terry," he said, leering. "I can spend more money with you, girl, than any three-peck of wood you pick up on the street. You keep that in mind." Terry's eyes caught his in a calculating glance. "I don't feel in the mood for any copulating with dogs, Porky. Your taste runs in a very weird bag, baby. I don't think I'm able to handle it." "Ain't no dogs involved in what I'm talking about, Terry. Just you and me," he said flatly. "Let me get a half a fourth from you for $25 then. Show me you like me a little," Terry said, and pinched him on one of his fat cheeks. Before he could reply, Smokey spoke up from the large chair she was sitting in. "The little bitch thinks she's playing on you, Porky." She said it loudly, so the whole room could hear. "Take care of your own business, bitch," Porky growled angrily. staring around the room at the addicts as if daring one of them to say something. Smokey turned her back and continued trying to find a hit in one of her veins. Ever since the panic, she and Porky had gotten closer together. They had amassed a huge sum of money before the dope began to flow back into the city.